Hey everyone, it's Jono from Veracity with another video in my video series, following up the last couple of videos, doing assessments and quizzes, really the responses using xAPI. I'll put a bunch of links in the description of the last couple of videos because they are important information to watch. If you're coming into this one first, you should check out those. It covers some important information. This is part of a series we're working on. We are, I think, second video on this topic. We've already covered an overview. We've already covered what the different learner responses look like. We last week did the response patterns. This time we're going to do what the correct response formats look like. And then, maybe more interesting, instead of all this spec and standard stuff that we're looking at, we'll get probably next week and maybe the following into looking at some data and looking at some visualizations using the data. So that's where we really tie it all together. This week is going to be on the correct response format. So we already covered how you track what the learner responded with. And then the last two videos we covered, or maybe just the last one, what you can track that defines the patterns for things like what choices are there in a multiple choice question, not the correct one, not what the learner responded, but what were all the choices. We did that in the last video. This one is particularly on the correct response format. So how do you indicate in xAPI that, of all the choices, this was the correct one, as an example. So we talked about this before. There's a lot of different types of CMI interactions, and just like all of the other things we've been talking about, the correct response pattern changes based on the different interaction type. So for example, the correct response pattern is different on a true-false question than it is on a Likert or a matching question. So what do we mean by that correct response pattern? There's a particular element in an activity's definition. Correct responses pattern. So this is a particular element where we will place what the correct response pattern is. And here's an example of what it looks like. Let me use my highlighter. Great. So we can see, based on our previous videos, that the interaction type is a true-false. We also know that this thing is just a CMI interaction type. So we know it's somebody responding to a question on an assessment of some sort. And we know that the question is a true-false question by this data. We also have this element. By the way, this snuck in the last time. I had a typo or just some extraneous cut and paste issues in the last one. But, I try to do these quick and informal, so it stuck. But anyway, correct response pattern is this element, and in this case, the correct response pattern is true. So what this is saying is we have a CMI interaction. We're answering a question. It's of true-false type, and the correct answer is true to this question. So pretty straightforward. All right, turning off the highlighter. Okay, should be good there. All right, be careful doing this on the client side. So if you are developing with an authoring tool and you are sending the correct response format and it's in some client-side JavaScript, savvy users will be able to access that information. So don't include it. You don't have to if you're doing it client-side and it's high stakes, or if you have the ability to do it server-side, then there's no such risk. So let's take a look at what these look like in the spec. I've got a couple pages from the spec. I'll put links to this as well. All right, so let me see if I can make that a little bit bigger. There we go. So these are the different interaction types, and you see what the format is for true or false. It's either true or false. Makes sense. For multiple choice or choice questions, it's a list of IDs that are the correct choices, delimited by this special character. We talked a lot about this special character in other sessions, so I won't, talk about it much here. But anyway, if it's just one item, if just, choice B, whatever the ID is for choice B is the answer, then you don't have this delimiter. But if there are multiple items, then you have to use that delimiter to separate them. Fill in and long fill in, you can have a big string of characters, and if it's not just one response, you can have that also delimited by that character. Matching is a set of pairs. The pairs are delimited by the regular delimiter, but within each pair, the source and target are delimited by this special character. Again, we've covered this before, so I won't go too much into it. Performance is a set of steps by our delimiter. Sequencing is an ordered list of items by our delimiter. Likert is a single item ID. Numeric, it can be a number or a range of numbers that is an acceptable number. And then other, there's no particular valid response pattern for other types because they're user defined. There's some additional information we won't get in here to today, but you can put parameters at the beginning of these values, like does case matter? Does order matter of the things that are in our list? Those kinds of things that you can specify as well using this parameter. So I know that is probably confusing, so let's just take a look at a few of them. I'm going to go to another page in Spec. Again, I'll put it in the description of this video. So Appendix C, great place to see what these look like. Here we have actually let me make that a little bigger and bring out the highlighter. So here we have a true and false question, just like the example I gave before, and the correct response is true. Pretty easy, makes sense. Let's go down to multiple choice. So here we've got a multiple choice question. Here are all of the choices, not what the correct choice is, but we covered this the last time. How do I detail all of the choices? And then our correct response pattern in this case is the choice golf and Tetris. So both of those are the correct answers in this multiple choice question. So, it's 2 items out of the items that you can select. Fill in, you often don't have, an exact answer, so you might not have a correct response pattern. In these we do. Our correct response pattern is Bob's your uncle. And here, a little bit longer, we're saying the case matters is false. So if you don't have the capital T, no problem. Or if you do it all uppercase, no problem. Our language is English, and the correct answer is to store and provide access to learning experiences. So fill in and long fill in, again, it's pretty often that you really can't automatically say this is the correct response because you're collecting a longer string from the user. But if you can, this is how you represent it. Likert. So here we go. Like last time, we have our scale. This is, the different options you have. And the correct response pattern here is a single item, Likert 3. This, again, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense because often Likerts are, a scale. Do you agree or disagree? And there is no right answer. So very often, kind of like fill in and long fill in, you won't really have this. But if for some reason there is a correct answer, you have a way to represent it. Matching. This is a set of source and targets. You match one thing to another. And the way that works is Ben correctly matches to 3, Chris to 2, Troy to 4, and Freddie to 1. That is the correct matching. And if you remember from last week, all of ours, wait till that disappears. There we go. All of our sources and targets. Here's our sources: Ben, Chris, Troy, Freddie. Targets 1, 2, 3, 4. And basically, this is the correct mapping of how those work. All right, moving on. Performance. This is very similar to the last one where you basically have a step and then kind of a numeric indicator of the success. It can be a string or an ID, I think, as well, but often you see it as a number. So basically, our different steps, user got a 1, different step, user got a 10, different step, user got nothing so far. So that is the correct response pattern. Correct was 1, correct was 10, correct was nothing. All right, moving on to sequencing, same type of thing. Tim comes first, then Mike, then Els, then Ben. So that's the correct response of all the choices when you put those in order. And then numeric, what this is saying is the correct response pattern is 4 to infinity. So when you have this delimiter, it's saying like this is a range. So 4, 2, and if you don't specify, there is no top bounds. If it were the other way around, if 4 were on the other side and there were nothing on this side, it would be any number 4 or less. You can also just put a specific number and not that delimiter, and then the answer is just that number. And then other, it's really up to you how you define it. Here it looks like somebody defined their own pattern that's maybe a map location or something like that. And this is really user defined, so you can use this any way you like. Okay, so I know that was pretty quick. We are going to continue this series next time and really get into looking at what this looks like in the system. I know we have spent a lot of time looking at the spec and talking about the types of R and how you track it, and that's really important to get the benefit out of tracking CMI interactions in xAPI. So what we'll cover next time is what it looks like when you follow all these rules. What does it look like in the LRS or analytics tool when you do? All right, great. We're going to go ahead and call it there for today. If you like this video, click the thumbs up or subscribe. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.